Hi, my name is Billy for the Waterwise Community Center. In our last video, we talked a lot about how water moves through our community and enters into our groundwater. Today, we're going to see what happens to the water that we weren't able to capture, and how that affects these small living things known as plankton. If you'd like to see our groundwater video, you can click right here. In that video, we followed water on its journey underground. However, not all water ends up following this path. When water falls on an impermeable surface, that is, a surface that doesn't allow water to pass through, it begins to run off and follow wherever gravity takes it. In our case, if there's too much water for our basins to handle, it eventually overflows and follows a path through our cities and communities to join up with the Santa Ana River. All of these cities are inside this marked area, known as the Santa Ana River Watershed. A watershed is a place where water collects and drains off into the same area. For us here in the Santa Ana watershed, any runoff water ends up draining into the ocean at Huntington Beach. Now, let's zoom into the beach and see what all this runoff water actually does when it enters into our ocean. Living in the water are tiny creatures that can tell us more about the health of the water. To find out what they are, let's ask Billy from the past to see if he knows.
They're plankton. Plankton are microorganisms, meaning that you can only see them with a super strong microscope. Now, there are many types of plankton in the world, but we're going to be talking about two specific kinds. Phytoplankton, which are like very, very small microscopic plants, and zooplankton, which are like little tiny animals that live in the ocean.
So, zooplankton and phytoplankton are our little helpers that can tell us just what's going on in the ocean. Plankton comes from a Greek word meaning drifter. So as the water currents push these little living things around, they're forced to live in whatever water may surround them. Zooplankton get their name from the fact that they're little animal plankton. You can remember this from the zoo part of their name. It's spelt like zoo. And what do you see at a zoo? The animals, of course. Zooplankton usually eats smaller plankton and can be anything from a small insect-like animal to crab larvae and baby fish. Our next type of plankton is the phytoplankton, which is the plant-like plankton. You can remember this by using the phyto part of their name. Phyto sounds like photo, and plants use photosynthesis to make their food. Phytoplankton also use photosynthesis to make their food, which begins the very base of the food chain in the ocean. This photosynthesis is also extremely important to us on land, since we rely on the air it produces. With about 70% of the Earth being covered in water, over 70% of the Earth's oxygen comes from the phytoplankton living in the oceans. So how exactly do plankton tell us about our water? Well, let's look back at our zooplankton. Usually we find a wide range of animals living as zooplankton in our oceans, but those numbers can change very quickly due to pollution. Things like dog poop, food waste, and plastics can add unwanted nutrients that can cause these animals to die off. If we're seeing a common species of animal suddenly start to disappear, that's a warning to us that something is going wrong in their home. Phytoplankton can also tell us what's going on in the water. With the increased use of fertilizers, excess nutrients tend to run off and enter the ocean, causing phytoplanktons to form large blooms. These blooms can cause a lot of major problems for marine life and for any other people that use the ocean. There are even certain types of phytoplankton that create a dangerous toxin that's extremely harmful for animals and humans. Plankton seems to give back what it receives. If we keep allowing trash and pollution to enter into our waters, the plankton will trash the ocean in response. So even though it looks like problems in our community stay here, we can see that they're much bigger than we think. That also means that any good that we do inside of our watershed actually helps our oceans. So here's a challenge to you. Do your best to protect our watershed and our oceans. Try to organize a trash cleanup, try to use cleaner methods of transportation, or try to use mulch and compost instead of chemical fertilizers. If you have any more ideas that you'd like to share with your community, you can write it down in the comments below. Thanks for joining us down in the ocean to learn about plankton and all they do for us. We'll see you next time.